So then, we are back with modern understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Tzayelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yirmiyahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yirmiyahu, not only the 61st chapter, but most importantly regarding then the trade, regarding the freighters, the merchants. What is a word for Scotland, for instance, going through some big changes depending upon the ending of the votes? But what should we do as far as understanding the direction from the Holy Instructions? From the Gentile level, obviously we read Daniel the 11th chapter. Though Scotland is not part of the big nations regarding the kingdom of the East, North and South, because those are very clearly identified. But then we understand these areas of the Gentiles. What can we conclude with absolute certainty? Simply the merchants taking the place of governments. Does not mean the merchants are going to become governmental groups or places or companies with powers over the government, but simply means the merchants are the very place where then governments can get taxes from. That's why they are so important. As far as we can understand, China has 57% of the world's trade by itself. That's a big number. Then if China includes China's friends, you can imagine the number is very high. What would be then the portion of the Holy Instructions related with the merchants? Very simply, we can start with Yirmiyahu the prophet. Yirmiyahu is extremely important because we find the Messiah himself, the Savior, is speaking of Yirmiyahu very often, and he was truly a great prophet. He was very serious during his time of duty, and then we should listen and read his holy instructions very closely. Let's then start with the 23rd chapter of Yirmiyahu the prophet, regarding then the 9th verse. Then the merchants who are chiefs, traders, then whose are then weighty in the earth. Sometimes these wordings you have to understand because they are transliterated from Hebrew or Aramaic to English. The understanding of this paragraph simply means the merchants are chief traders whose presences are very weighty, or then those merchants traders are then very weighty. What they are trying to say is then these people, these many companies, they have a specialized system that tracks packages. It's very simple. However, considering the number of monetary systems becoming virtual and governments not able to influence with the policies of the government to get taxes from, that's where the situation then changes. Governments, they have a tendency, they are the macho men. They can do everything. They can have their own ways of printing money, their own laws, their own ways of charging people. They are it as far as we can understand. Now, when you include virtual monetary systems with value. Yet, central banks can't interfere with them. And when people are using these monetary systems for purchases, creating volume of trade, and governments can't get taxes from, then they must think very closely. Why then these merchants are then weighty? Because they have a system simply tracking packages. However, the link of governments and merchants is simply for the purposes of charging taxes. So then, we understand this factor. Where do we find on our holy instructions explaining then these merchants in the future when the autumn feast is taking place? Try to understand, per the calculations, because of the calculation of the lunar eclipses and many other factors such as the census of the time when the Messiah was in the earth, you find then the holy Shabbats and the holy feasts at the time. They were able to calculate via the every lunar view of every month is extremely precise, and the Messiah was born then in the mid-September of our time, mid-Tishri, the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Does his tabernacle then with his people. But then, regarding trade, we understand this factor as then a system providing taxes. And the calculation is very simple. As governments, they must gather taxes. Then virtual systems, they must have a link. US started a link with the virtual systems, and we understand then Bitcoin, extremely important monetary system, is linked with the USD as the first situation going on, because rather than having the value of the gold, then they have the value of the USD. But the understanding of the situation is not the complications of so many other governmental systems, but the simplicity of the holy instructions explaining why these merchants are so important. Where do we find this? Revelation, the 8th chapter. You find in the 3rd part of the ships destroyed, the 3rd part of the oceans then destroyed. We do understand Gog and Magog. A bomb in the future must be released on Arabia where oil is at. A big, huge pit is going to be produced and then gushing out of petroleum in the ocean. We understand the Indian Ocean and the Pacific is the very area where this oil is going to be dumped into the sea. However, it's very close to China. You find the area where then this petroleum is going to come out and destroy the fish in the water. Then you find very precisely during the time of the autumn feast, the 3rd part of the ships then destroyed is where the concentration of those ships they're going to be at. Based from these merchants, you don't find governments anymore. Why then merchants? You find in the 8th chapter, then you find later chapter, you find chapter 1:8, from 1:8 to 20. Many times you find merchants and the merchants and the merchants and the merchants and the merchants. It doesn't speak of government anymore resolving problems. It doesn't say anymore of kingdoms related with the leadership of merchant ships. You find then the merchants making decisions. There is an understanding of Babylon, for instance, and the great city of Babylon, explaining of a spiritual condition of Babylon during its time. But then the merchants, and the silk, and the spices, and gives you an entire list of those items, because it's related with Ishmael, the first traders in the earth, from the lineage of Ibrahim, because the Creator was involved with Ibrahim, and a half of the anointing was with Ishmael. So absolutely, definitely, you find merchants in charge in the very near future. However, they are not going to go against governments, but governments are going to lend from them their computerized package tracking system. So then, when those virtual systems are properly linked by a certain value, yet must be established, either gold or some sort of existing monetary system, such as Chinese yen, for instance, or USD. Then each country doing trade with China via the system must have then a card. How much then a nation is going to charge each individual based from what they earn from a monetary system, virtual monetary system, using it, earning it, investing it, and not linked with central banks. Why was then the US so angry with Bitcoin? Because they had no link with them. So the situation is simple, but extremely laborious. If nations, they don't understand their freighters, the way they track their packages, then not only this, there is a very important computerized system they must link then the monetary system, having a value to it. From then on, they have to be linked with freighters, and on the label that goes on the box, if a person wants to receive these items, he must have the description, price, taxes at the very moment when the label is generated, and taxes then instantly deducted. Because of these, the merchants are going to have the importance stated on the 23rd chapter of Yeshayahu the prophet. And these will cause lots of management of system from the freighters, a new system of charging taxes, then a module system for every country, because they obviously are going to charge distinct rates per countries. Some countries are going to say, for instance, 10%, others 5%. So a person would have a slot in a computer, and in whatever country a person is involved with, then slots the card from this particular country. As they do trade there, then is deducted instantly. The concept and the understanding of the system is simple. However, the physical aspects of having the taxes then deducted instantly from freighters is not that simple. It requires a lot of labor in linking up these systems, and then understanding the card, understanding then the percentages. Let's say, for instance, a person is receiving from a monetary virtual system linked, for instance, with USD. Then they begin to invest with these virtual monetary system. Then they begin to earn every month with these, and those are huge numbers. At some point, then they have to start charging taxes because of the amount earned. Some nations, they're going to deduct taxes when they purchase. But then when they take this monetary system and they convert to the paper money, are nations going to charge the people? What percentage? If they're going to transfer these amount to someplace else around the world, are they going to charge it again? Or should it be charged at the end? So there are many questions going on with this. And as they do these investments and there is a bank linked with it, are they going to give interest? What's the amount? So the concept is somewhat simple, but linking up these topics, each of them is extremely laborious. People are not going to be lazing around. Can't believe it. However, until nations they observe in their computerized systems taxes coming in from each individual doing trade in the system, it's another situation. That's why then when we read Revelation, you don't find any more countries, you don't find any more kingdoms, you find merchants. The very core of the understanding is merchantships. So then, these gives us a few understandings of what's coming in the very near future. We are speaking of roughly 20 months. China is already leading these very strongly, linking up with many other countries and many other stores. They are making movements of 24 digits. It's incredible what China is doing, because they must be on top at some point. And each nation having a straight link with the Bank of China obviously will receive many benefits. But then for the country where this person is at receiving these benefits, how they should get charged, or how they should be charged. And nations, they don't have a clue yet of these important links. However, as we understand, China is substituting the USD, then it doesn't take very much for a person to understand, for instance, a Yanbit or BTN, some sort of a virtual monetary system. And then China becomes the solely bank involved with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people around the world. The system is becoming virtual. Paper money is becoming obsolete. So then, as far as Scotland, the question is how ambitious they are. As we can understand, as the wealth of the world being distributed amongst the people because of the new system of investment, there will be a lots of money over there to earn. Any other form of a system joined by other realms or nations, should say, they are going to have an imbalance in the system. Because, for instance, the euro is going through a very tough time. The Eurozone is not growing. It is stagnated for quite some time. Then they're going to print out more money in order, to get the system going. But when these people, they take their euros and buy a virtual monetary system, how are they going to deal with it? because they have the same monetary system in many countries. But then some of them are going to earn more than the others. How are they going to deal with these imbalances? Worst yet, there are nations, they are on loans for quite some time, then they take their loans, they begin to do a very nice and great investments, they are wise with the expenses. Then how are they going to pay back? If there is not a legal way of charging them the proper taxes. Are they going to honor the debts? So any kind of a linked monetary system not linked with China is going to have lots of imbalances going on. And some of the countries won't work. They're going to make bad decisions. Other nations are going to make wise decisions. And at the end of it, when each of them should pitch in, then at the end of it, they would not have a very nice answer, would they? So, can Scotland understand the importance of this topic? Do they have a plan of oil and gas? Making a deal with China is very easy these days. London has the exchange of Chinese yen. Having a military is fairly easy. They can buy a submarine or a ship, few aircrafts, a bit of an army, and that's it. Creating a monetary system is not a problem. But then how ambitious they are. What natural resources they can give so that in exchange for then developed country. If they have no big ambitions regarding the new system, the system of China, then they should remain with Great Britain. Now, if they want to excel in making best decisions, obviously they should then separate. The decision is theirs. Based from what we can read from the Holy Instructions, you find very precisely. And the merchants of the earth is regarding merchant ships. We understand the maritime merchants are then the very core of the entire leadership of the time of the end. Governments are going to be secondary because they must have the system of the freighters to receive taxes. Governments, they can't create a system of their own. Tracking packages is simply ridiculous. And the freighters, they won't send their software with thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of packages, so the government must analyze, verify what it is, and then charge properly, and then charge taxes per item. It is simply not doable. Now, if they use the existing system of the freighters, then obviously it would be very simple for the government to come up with some policies when they then print the label. Then taxes are deducted instantly via their very own system. It's only rerouted back to the government. Much simpler. That's why then the freighters, they have the forward motion. So then, Scotland has, from the Holy Instructions, as we can understand in many other countries, how they should be dealing. Logistics, and then virtual systems, understanding the Bank of China, how they do their own work, and making deals with China regarding oil and gas. We have the instructions, we understand what's coming in the future. Now the choice is theirs. So then, last video was then explained regarding the spring feast and the autumn feast found in Leviticus 23rd chapter. Yeshayahu the prophet in the 65th and 66th chapter explained then the time of the end and when the new earth then is re-established. How is it going to be? Some people believe because they trust some sort of salvation of their own, and then at the end they're going to come out of the dust. Some people, they think they're going to be taken into heaven. There are such crazy beliefs out there. But the problem is, we are not going to heaven because we were made for the earth. What is taking place is then those who are obviously in the Messiah testifying on his behalf, explaining the holy prophecies. These people, when they produce fruit, then when they die, they must rest. Their souls must rest. However, those who do not have the knowledge of tabernacling, when they die, they go straight down into torment until the time of the end, when then the first death is thrown into this earth while burning, then the second death. This then what is taking place. Afterwards, then the earth is refurbished. And then those people, in gradual understanding, they come from the dead. They come from their resting places. And then a glorified body is given. We're going to have a meal, a nice celebration, and then we are going to work. What is the first order of the agenda? Tabernacling. Was it not Moses involved with building the tabernacle? Was it not then the people later on, when the Messiah came, building the holy cities with the tabernacles? So we shall do these in the new earth. There is no mysticism of a city coming down from heaven. The understanding is there is a city that must be built, but it's not coming from heaven entirely. If the Creator would do this, why he didn't do this in the desert? No, we must build. People have a tendency of becoming mystical. But when we read the Holy Instruction, there is no mysticism when you read properly. So then, because of these, we're then in a very special time of this age, the initiation of the time of the restoration period. There are sections of the 11th chapter of Daniel. We are at 11, 7, and 8, awaiting for the Soviet Union or then the Northern Kingdom to make a deal with Egypt, and then many more developments from then on. So next time I'm going to evaluate more these areas of merchants. I'm going to gather more scripture regarding the merchants, Revelation, and then also the prophets, then to make then a statement to prove that these situations are true. And the most important objective at the moment, it's not war, it's not going to war, it's not helping those at war, simply providing a path for the civilians and protecting them, and then becoming concerned with these systems, merchants versus taxes versus monetary systems in a virtual sense. And then coming up with modules. What percentages? Transfers, loans. Each of these must be specified. So please stay tuned. Much more coming up.